You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 377 of our podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy. Thanks.
It is Memorial Day, holiday weekend here. Hope everyone enjoyed their day off. And we had a lot of Cubs news and happenings. Games were played, and we will recap the week that was. We will talk about the news and preview the week that will be. And to help us break down all things Cubs, you know him from his work at Northside Baseball and, of course, his many appearances here on this podcast. Matt Trueblood, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Always. Am I closing in on, I guess, Evan's probably untouchable, but I've got to be maybe past Ryan Davis now? I mean, what's the...
For sure.
You past Ryan Davis, you're probably James Naveau, and who else would be in your category?
I mean, he's getting close to Evan tier here. So yeah,
okay.
I haven't counted in a while, but
yeah, we will have to run the numbers. Probably that's a
Jared Willis is up there.
Jared.
You're in the Fab Five.
That's yeah. We will run the numbers as we get closer to the All-Star break and find out. So let's talk about the week that was here with the Cubs. We had this is the weak part of the schedule, and we've said it now 2 weeks in a row, how important these games are. You played a tough part of your schedule in April. You came out exceeding all expectations with a record that was beyond what people thought you could do with that schedule in April. Here in May, it was key to not turn around and give a lot of those games back and to beat the teams you're supposed to beat.
16-5 over the 21 game stretch was our knockout punch. That was our, if you do that, then you're in the driver's seat.
That's right. And 9-3, not so bad here to start this stretch. And the Cubs played the Miami Marlins and the Cincinnati Reds this week. Two teams. The Marlins for sure. We were thinking minimum 2 out of 3, possible sweep potential here. And the Reds in Cincinnati, always weird, always more difficult than it should be. And so we were a little nervous about that. We'll get to those games, but let's start in Miami, playing the Miami Marlins.
It wasn't a great start to the week, was it, Jeremy?
The start to the week, I think heartbreaker is the term to describe that first loss. 8-7 defeat by the Marlins, walking it off, getting 2 runs in the 9th with Palencia in pitching the 9th inning. Pat, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on how this started. How nervous were you after the Cubs dropped this first one?
It was a disappointing game. It's a type of game that you looked at the Marlins lineup and you're like, oh my God, do they have anybody with the OPS over 500? I mean, this is a terrible team. You should never give up more than 5 runs to them, even on a bad day with the wind blowing out at Wrigley. But here we are in Miami, and somehow managed to blow with 2 outs in the 9th inning of all things, a game that they had the lead in. That's the kind of game where, of course, the immediate question is, God, this team really needs a closer, right? Because wouldn't Palencia look good in the 8th inning and blah, 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 everybody back, one more spot. Everybody feels like they're just a little bit out of position. Whereas my dad would say, is it good Palencia or bad Palencia? Depending on the day. And, it was a rough start because, you're playing bad teams, but there is pressure to win those games. And when you start off with a loss in the first one on a road trip, I think the week turned out about as well as it could under those circumstances.
Matt, we've got a lot of things to talk about in this series, but I think a couple of players I wanted to get your thoughts on here, as the Cubs had the returning Matt Shaw, and of course PCA continuing to do PCA things. So let's talk about those two as we roll through these next two games. A blowout victory, 14-1, a great way to answer back after that heartbreaker, and then the 2-1 game. That one, it was just they had to will that victory. Another good performance from Cade Horton helping out there too.
Yeah. And I mean, to touch on Shaw right away, it was good to see him come back and fold right into the teeth of this lineup and the way that they can produce from top to bottom. Changes that you can see are there. Now, I think there are bigger changes they will still need to make that probably don't happen in season, because you don't want to rewire a guy's whole swing. And I think he's learned now what will probably have to change after the year. But they made more sort of minor alterations and get his approach focused more on staying through that ball to right center, which we saw pay off over and over throughout this series and throughout the whole week. So that was really exciting. And you're supposed to blow them out once in the series, but to cobble together that tougher win in the third game was crucial, because like you said, when you're starting a road trip with losing a winnable game, you get nervous, because that's the kind of thing that can snowball really fast. It was good to see the resilience of the whole team in those next couple of games.
Yeah, we had another great performance from another great week, I'd say, from PCA, Kyle Tucker, the offense as a whole. I do feel like we talk a lot about PCA because of how impressive this performance has been to start out. Seiya Suzuki doing great things as well, but I also don't want to. I feel like we neglect, dare I say, are taking Kyle Tucker for granted, because we just assume he's going to be awesome every single time. And as we rolled into Cincinnati, he was extremely important.
And even that third game against Miami, he sets the tone with the home run in the first inning.
And the third, exactly.
Give up a run in the bottom of the first. It's 1-1 until the eighth inning. Boy, talk about a game where you feel like you're going to fritter it away. And then he gets the big hit in the eighth inning, and then scores on a Matt Shaw hit. And of course, nothing like letting the Marlins commit an error, which is perfectly acceptable. That's what they do. You should benefit from that too. That's why they're where they are, right? So, but he was involved in the 2 runs that were scored in that game, and that's what your best players need to do. They need to just kind of be there when you need them somehow.
And he is definitely the Cubs' best player. I can't just having him in the lineup, how it makes everybody better. It's just fantastic to watch. As we head to Cincinnati for the first game, a nice blowout win in Cincinnati. Felt good with the Cubs putting up 13 runs. And before we get totally off of Matt Shaw, a couple big defensive plays. Here's a guy that we've all been so focused on how is he going to hit that we've seen him make 2 great plays this week on defense. Just the highlight reel stuff, from falling backward and somehow making a play, and just really impressive. Matt Shaw on defense as well. Pat, how excited were you to see him make these plays?
I mean, here's a guy, much like Michael Busch last year at first base, who hasn't really played a lot of third base in his career, and is really just the last year or so kind of, I think, more or less dedicated himself to playing third base. And it wasn't that long ago we were talking about him as a potential second baseman for this season, depending on how things worked out with our our pursuit of Bregman and others. And so, I'm pleased to see the progression he's made at third base. I don't know if that's where he's going to end up for his whole career, but at least for now, if it's better than the defense we got at third base last year. And it just feels nice not having it's felt all year like the Cubs have been using the pitcher as, in the third base slot in the batting order because it's been so woeful in its production. So for him to be able to hit the ball a little bit and also to play good defense is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, he's just not as mistake prone at third, which is nice, right? There were a couple of plays, especially I think it was at the final game in Cincinnati. There were a couple of balls where I was like, gosh, I'd like you to knock that down at least. Maybe you can't make the long throw across and get the guy, but you can keep it on the infield, that kind of stuff. But he's not making things worse the way Gage Workman had a tendency to make things worse, the way John Birdie has been erratic there. He looks more comfortable, at least within his range. Ideally, perfect world, and maybe in another 3 months or 2 years, he'll have an extra step of range. The athleticism is there for that. But right now, he's just what he gets to, he's handling capably, which is nice to see. It shouldn't be asking very much, but it's been more than we've been able to consistently expect from the Cubs for the last 3-4 years at that position.
The Cubs were down 4-0 at one point in that blowout win on the Friday. Pete Crow Armstrong able to rack up 6 RBIs, the grand slam. This is a team that for the last few years, and we saw it again in the next game that they lost, this was a team where if they fall behind, a lot of times, even early, you would just pack it in and be like, oh, well, that's it. This 4 runs is insurmountable. Could never come back.
Yeah, 4 runs, 6 runs, forget about it. And
forget about it.
We've seen now with the Arizona game, and now, as we progress throughout the season, it's every week there's a comeback, like big comeback, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Even that, the loss, that was a game where you felt like they were in it. They were still in it in the ninth. They had a chance to win that game, and that's a game that they weren't in for a lot of it. So this was it's a completely different Cubs lineup offensively, to where you feel like they can come back and you feel like they can win these games. And it's a real. It makes every game fun because these Cincinnati games in the past few years have been so much not fun, a lot of not fun to watch, and you just felt like they were in it every single time, even when Colin Ray didn't have it. He didn't have it this time. I think I don't know, Matt, if you think that this is kind of the end of the run here for Colin Ray, or if this was just, if he can still keep the magic a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully people weren't expecting Colin Ray to have a 1.5 ERA all season or anything, right?
Sandy Koufax, he is not. Turns out,
no, right-handed for one thing, and it's a much lower slot. I mean, just it's hard, but I do think he's still going to be okay. I think Matthew Boyd will still be okay after a couple of rocky outings here. It's just they were going to creep back a little bit from how well they had started. A lot of it was just perfect execution or a little bit of good luck here and there. And some of that's going to slide back on you. It's just how the season works. You're right that the wonderful thing is the depth, the balance of this lineup. And Craig Counsell is looking at, I don't have as many guys in that bullpen as I'd like to be able to trust. He's using a pretty slow hook with his starters. It drives me a little bit nuts in the moment sometimes because I'm wired differently. And what's impressive to me is I know Craig Counsell's wired differently too. I keep expecting him to pull, especially Ben Brown, about 3 or 4 batters earlier than he does in a lot of these games. and he just lets him go because he's trying to steal 1 out, 2 outs. If he can get a full inning, awesome, to shorten the game, not because he knows he has a lockdown bullpen he just wants to get to, but because he has not enough guys that, he wants to go through 4 innings with them if he can help it. So he's let some of these starters wear it a little bit, trusting that that great offense is going to come back and give him a chance. And that if he can get through an extra couple of outs, not having that workload land on the bullpen is going to be good for the team.
Speaking of Ben Brown, lost in that third game where the Cubs, talk about coming back from 4 runs, came back from 6-run deficit in the 6th inning and won going away by 3 runs. So that's a 9-run difference. Ben Brown started that game. And I do think that if Colin Ray and Boyd and Horton coming up weren't pitching as well as they would, I think we'd really be nervous or be talking a lot more, I guess, about how uncomfortable it is to watch Ben Brown on the mound lately. It feels like almost like he's regressing. And of course, we've talked a lot on this podcast about how we view him more in the back end of the bullpen kind of manner. And I understand they want to, use him as a starter because they don't have any starters, any other starters. But, he and his 2 pitches just seem like they're out on an island there. And especially if his control isn't great, or especially if, something bad happens, it just seems like the wheels come off. And he's had some really horrific starts. And I don't want to destroy the kid's confidence at this point. I just don't know what they do. I mean, Javier Assad and with his injury and mind you, the Jordan Wicks thing is getting a little concerning too, with his never-ending list of injuries and sort of disappearance from. This is a guy who was talked about as being in the rotation last year and actually was in the rotation last April, and he's kind of completely not even, he's off the radar, altogether. I don't know what your thoughts are, Matt, about Ben Brown and about what the Cubs do here. I think it has like you said, it does have an impact on how you use your other pitchers, because you realize that you've got this spot of the rotation that is just not going to produce more than 4 or 5 innings of often mediocre baseball. Yeah,
and particularly maddening, confusing baseball too, right? I mean, a lot of these starts he ends up with 9 strikeouts and 1 walk, and you go, wait, I swear he was behind 3-0 on everybody. Sometimes it's true, and then he just lays it. He takes 3 miles an hour off the fastball, throws it right down the middle, and gets scorched. That's how it started with the Marlins start on this trip. But
he's averaging less than 5 innings a start, by the way.
Yeah, it's really, you hit the nail on the head. They would probably have, if not given up on him as a starter and moved him to the bullpen, at least send him back to Iowa to reset, work on the changeup. I don't know, something. If not for the fact that they can't afford to. They don't have enough starters healthy and on hand to make that decision. So on he goes. And I think Council's done a really good job of planning around that and knowing I kind of need a length guy available every time Brown starts, because a lot of times I'm going to try to eat 7, 8 outs with a guy to build a bridge. But also there's a margin for error here, both in the standings and just within a game, because of what that lineup can do. So both starts on the trip, honestly, they didn't win Monday night, but they should have. And they did win Sunday, and both of them were, obviously they were terrible starts for Brown, but you could still work around it because this lineup can do so many things. So Council's going to continue trying not to burn out what is a bullpen that's starting to come together, but it's a lot of old dudes, and you really have to monitor their workload in addition to not being sure how much you trust them at any given time.
There was a game this week, I forget which one, where the Cubs used 3 pitchers, and I added up their composite age. I think it was 102. I kid you not.
There is a. I sent this out on Blue Sky. I think there was a game. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was Friday night. It was the Friday night game that ended up being a blowout. The last 4 starters who marched in for them were, or 4 starters. Some of them have been starters, but that It was Brad Keller. It was Drew Pomerantz, Chris Flexen, and Ryan Presley. And combined, those guys have almost 3,000 innings pitched in the majors. It is a weird bullpen. A bunch of guys who spent a long time in rotations, and most of them are in their mid-30s. A few of them are pushing 40, and Ryan Brazier joining the staff isn't making him really any younger. It's incredible that they've been as good as they've been. But I think Counsell is very aware that even more than with a similarly uneven bullpen that was 3 years younger, he's got to keep some mileage off those arms, at least until they can make an upgrade to that unit, which will probably happen in July, not right now.
Or when Imanaga gets back.
Yeah.
Ideally.
We'll
and then
talk.
maybe, and then, Ben Brown goes to the bullpen, and then they also get another bullpen arm. I mean, they're going to have to do some, I think, if they're serious, and it looks like if they're in a position where they are going to be a playoff team this year, they need several new pitchers in that bullpen, I think. I think Merriweather's departure is a sign that they understand that.
Yeah, that's right. They DFA'd Julia Merriweather since last time we podcasted. We also saw Porter Hodge go on the IL with an oblique injury. We also had Miguel Amaya leave with an oblique strain as well.
Thankfully, we have Reese McGuire. Thank you very much. The often referred to as the Mike Piazza of his era.
Often?
Well, his first game he was with 2 home runs in his debut. Not bad for a 30-year-old, 7-year vet.
It's it's just good. It's just being around Carson Kelly. Apparently, you're just
King
good.
Kelly, we call him.
That's right. So with that, Pat, let's roll into. We've got a game. You got a game to play with us. Yeah,
this is called this Wrigleyville Nation Connections. The Athletic has a version of this called Connections, and the New York Times has their own Connections. The Athletics is sports related. Now, in those versions, you have 16 names, and you have to pull out 16 words, and you pull out 4 to form a group where you, because of some apparent connection that those 4 words all share. I'm going to make it a little bit easier today. I'm going to give you the 4 words. You just have to tell me what the category is. So the first group is Hack Wilson, Sammy Sosa, PCA, and Seiya Suzuki. Now you tell me what the category is.
It's got to be have had at least 45 RBIs through the Cubs' first 50 games or something.
Players who have or are on pace to average 1 RBI per game, or 1 RBI or more per game for an entire season in Cubs history.
Yeah.
It was fun during not just the blowout, but also in the comeback win to watch Crow Armstrong and Suzuki kind of go back and forth on the RBI. I like that kind of competition. PCA goes up by 2, and then Seiya hits a 3-run homer to put the game away, and now the Cubs are, and he's ahead of PCA now. So it's a fun contest, but it really goes to just how prolific this lineup is. That you've got 2 guys with those levels of RBIs, and then you look at Tucker and Swanson and others, and they're not bad either. It's just They scored so many runs. I saw another stat today. The Cubs, it was among NL Central teams, the Cubs have the top 4 home run hitters and 7 of the top 9. There you go. How do you do that? Crazy.
We're right at, today is, we're recording Monday evening here.
Yeah, it's a third of the season, right?
They played their 54th game today. Yeah. So multiply everything by 3. They got guys on pace for 40, guys on pace for 35. It is more than I think we could have possibly expected. And by the way, why I was wrong about PCA, which maybe it's premature to say that exactly, but you guys have heard my skepticism on PCA going all the way
He
back
swings
to
at everything, never walks, and if pitchers could just learn to not throw strikes, he'd be in trouble.
And what I said at the time was, what I've said repeatedly was, there are ways around. You can be that guy who swings at everything and still succeed, but you have to have a freaky hit tool or freaky power. And I didn't see that PCA really had either one. I'm still not sure that he has that crazy feel to hit that might make that.
He has the
playable,
speed,
like
though,
Black
that
Cordero.
kind of is like it's sort of a weird variable on that front, right? Like he can hit a ball that should be an out and be safe. That's, that's that part of it. But the power part is the part that I think none of us saw coming, right?
Nope. I did, I wrote an article back in mid-April when he was still kind of struggling and said, what I thought was going to happen was a bit more selectivity, because we had some swing data. Now we have even better swing data that just came out this week, but we had enough swing data for me to say, when PCA squares the ball up, when he's, when we can tell from the pitch velocity and his swing speed and the resulting exit velocity that he got the good part of the bat on the ball, it's at a pretty impressive launch angle. It's at a power hitter's launch angle. That tells us his swing is geared to generate real pop when he gets it right.
And he's getting it in the air at a higher rate.
Because of that swing. But what I didn't foresee, what I really would not have guessed was possible, was that he'd go on swinging the same way and he'd find a way to just more consistently get that barrel to the ball without making a drastic change to the swing. So there's going to be another round of adjustments. I don't think PCA is actually going to hit 40 homers this year. But
he's pulled 3 balls this year down the line, either at Wrigley or on the road, like against the Reds the other day. He did it against the White Sox. He did it another time, I remember, where he hits it literally like a towering home run down the line, where he's way ahead of the ball, but smashes the living hell out of it and hits it high, and it stays fair for a 3-run home run or grand slam or whatever it might be.
It reminds me of Anthony Rizzo, which I never thought that PCA would at all remind me of Rizzo, but Rizzo used to hit balls like that, where he'd hit a ball that you didn't think he had a chance of keeping fair, but he did, because he was able to get the bat like out in front of him on an inside pitch, and just, it wasn't hooking. You'd expect it to hook, but it would stay true because it was hit so well and so cleanly. PCA is doing that now. Where did that come from? I can't. Yeah, it's.
Hey, maybe he can pitch too, like Rizzo. You never know. Like, I would Javier Baez him though. I would not throw him a strike for an entire series and see what he does if I was an opposing team. I mean, especially the teams the Cubs are playing now that are so bad. I mean, what do they have to lose, right? What do the Rockies have to lose? Just don't throw him any strikes and see if he swings on his own. I don't know.
And I haven't looked into this part, but I wonder if, because I do think part of how his swing is geared is that he's going to get to that pitch, unless it's a perfect back foot breaking ball, he can get down to that ball low and in and hurt you even when you think you executed decently. The thing about Javi was, as a right-handed batter, more of the league was comfortable throwing that slider low and away where he'd need a bat twice as long as his bat to actually reach it. I think it's just harder to do that for most of the league to a lefty batter. So he has this sort of wired in advantage of just, it's harder for them to throw him the junk that he truly can't touch. He'll still swing at it if they do successfully throw it. But I think most pitchers just aren't as good at throwing that kind of waste pitch in the first place to a lefty.
Heaven forbid it goes in the dirt. He'll be safe at first on a swing third strike too. I mean, it doesn't take much for him.
Yeah.
There was an interesting question on the score. I was listening to an interview from, I don't know, a day or two ago on their podcast version. And I was curious what you thought. At first, it sounds like a dumb, like kind of like you're bored and you're talking sports all day question. But question was, would you trade PCA straight up for Paul Skeens? Now, my first instinct is I'd rather have Paul Skeens in my rotation, I guess, if he's an ace pitcher, but but then the next one is he hasn't had Tommy John surgery yet, so you're kind of inheriting that future, right? The way things are these days. So I don't know. Our position players, you feel like pitchers are so brittle now that, like, I'm talking about like for the next 4 years or 5, whatever the length of their tenure is with the team before they're free agent. Are pitchers so brittle that you'd just rather have a position player than a pitcher who can, especially who plays a defensive position of import?
For me, in a blink, I wouldn't even entertain this. And not, I just told you why I'm still a little bit skeptical on certain things about PCA. I also think if you'd asked me 2 months ago, I would have been a little bit more worried about PCA just running face first through the bricks and ivy,
which he doesn't do. Have you noticed how great he is at getting the ball and catching balls without even touching the ball? I'm like, thank God he didn't like tear his ribs open on that, or like every other, first or second year Cub outfielder seems to have done in the last 2 decades.
I think I just came in too low on the dude's makeup because, he passionate. It's very fun, but he doesn't strike me as a real cerebral dude. And I didn't necessarily trust him to make some of the adjustments he has, but he's gotten materially better defensively in this way that he can get to all the same balls without being, with his body much more under control at the catch point and making good decisions about whether to slide or dive or how or any of that. So my estimated injury risk for PCA is a little lower. I do think he's, I don't think he's going to keep this up, but I think he's a star caliber overall player because the offense is going to be good enough. And yeah, I'm not rolling the dice on a pitcher against that because a pitcher is going to get hurt. He's going to get hurt. And in the meantime, because Skeens knows pitchers get hurt, Skeens is a cerebral guy, and Skeens has adjusted the way he pitches to try and minimize that risk. He's gotten a little worse this year. All of which, the cherry on top of the sundae is because Paul Skeens went and won the Rookie of the Year last year. He got a full year of service time, which PCA still didn't technically have when this year began. The Cubs have control of PCA for the year 2030, which the Pirates do not have over Paul Skeens. So no brainer.
That's $30 million right there, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
I also would say that if I were a player on PCA's team, he would be the guy who I would just absolutely like. I would like him as a teammate, but I would hate him as a baseball player because I would be the guy who worked so hard and learned every corner and every route and studied the pitchers and the hitters and tried to get every single inch of an advantage to make up for my lack of natural God-given talents or whatever. And I'd watch this bozo run around like just kind of like instinctively doing stuff that like I'm like, you didn't do that on purpose, did you? No, I just thought it'd be fun. It's like it's like I don't know what I did. I just ran and it happened, and it'd be like it would be very frustrating for me. But you like the success, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's been so a joy, and I do think he's we can't know exactly how much, but I think he's probably benefiting quite a bit from Happ and Tucker and Turner and these guys who, it probably isn't just that and now I'm better at this. He's probably been taken under their wings a little bit. And
I'm sure he does do some of the learning. I have heard, there are times when he's talked to other players and gotten their perspectives on things too. It's just, he's just so instinctively good at baseball that it's hard to, especially fielding. It's just hard to quantify how you do that. You can't teach that. It just, you have that, I guess.
I am curious to see how he comes out of his next slump, right? So like he's been doing this, riding very high. When it goes low, how low does it go before it bounces back somewhere where we expect it to be? That'll be interesting. It's always interesting for a young player, and PCA is no exception there. It will not stay at this pace, and hopefully he remains a force in this lineup continues to be just such a fun player. You hit it on the head. He's just a joy to watch play. Like every time he's can't miss now at the plate and in the field. I love when the camera's got a shot at a ball going deep, and then PCA just enters the frame where you didn't see him. He's now here and making the catch and looks effortless when you know he was full sprint running at all of his PCA speed there. So always impressive.
All right, here's a real quick one for you. This is Connections Part 2. You ready, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
Javier Assad, Ian Happ, Porter Hodge, and Miguel Amaya.
Is it all even left oblique strains, or is it just oblique strains?
Yes, left oblique strains.
It's all left.
Explain that to me, will you? It's not just for Reese McGuire's sake that we are asking. We just want to know, like, is this the new like hamstring? Like, what is this? Explain.
They're gonna have to hire a new trainer specifically. I mean, oblique strains are more common than they used to be. Why? Because baseball is a game that requires high intensity, explosive rotational moves. And that's always been true. But first of all, hasn't always been well understood even by some of the players who played it. Even, 60 years ago, there were very good players who were not exceptional rotational athletes because they found a different way to do it against inferior competition. Now you have to be crazy with the oblique strength and the things you can do, but you're constantly at some risk of pushing beyond that red line, just like a pitcher and an elbow. It's hitters and it's pitchers, and it can be certain fielders in situations. Amayo's, I think, was trying to come out of the crouch really fast and create that rotation on a throw to second. So they've gotten a little bit more common in general. Why are the Cubs being just slaughtered with them? And you rattled off those four. Also, Matt Shaw, right at the beginning of spring training, had one. Why? It's probably coincidence. It's probably bad luck. It's probably not really a training issue. But one way or another,
20% of your roster.
Yeah, you got guys who have pushed beyond their red. I mean, if you had 4 Tommy Johns, you'd wonder if you weren't doing quite a good enough job at arm care and preventing going beyond that red line. So maybe they need to examine whether they're not doing a good enough job at managing the rotational aspects of players' athleticism. But yeah, that's again, it's like Matt Shaw's leg kick. I can't imagine they know how to fix that in season. So right now, you just make sure everyone understands stretching's important. You got to make sure you're well hydrated, good nutrition, because dehydration can, we think of that as just leading to cramping, but that sort of stuff can contribute to a muscle overload. Obliques just belong to this set of muscles that are hard to strengthen in the first place. Very important to do so, but it's hard. And then it's also hard to keep them healthy, really hard to nurse them through recovery, which is the big problem. Basically, this year I'm here in the Twin Cities, and I've been spending more time at Target Field covering the Twins for one of the other sites that I run. They talk a lot with obliques. What you do is wait until nothing hurts anymore when you go to do baseball activities. As soon as something hurts, you have to stop and wait until it doesn't hurt again. There's not a great stepwise, move through this progression. You just have to wait because the obliques are so tricky that way. They're involved in breathing. They're involved in sitting and standing and sleeping. So yeah, it stinks when they get hurt because they are hard you can't accelerate the process of recovering from them. Hopefully it turns out to be mild as it did with Hap, and you're okay relatively quickly, but it's really hard to predict that, as we've already seen, because they thought Hodge was going to be similarly short term. In fact, I think he'd been hurt for a couple of days before they even shelved him. And now, that one looks like it's probably going to be another few weeks at least.
Sitting, standing and sleeping are all risks for me to strain an oblique. Those are my strenuous activities. The other news to hit on before we talk about the week that will be for the Cubs is the announcement that Wrigley Field will host the Major League Baseball All-Star Game in 2027. This is huge news for the Cubs and for the neighborhood and all the happenings. I don't pay much attention to All-Star Game festivities. It's for children. I don't really get much out of it. So I haven't paid attention in years, but apparently it's become a big deal. The MLB is giving the Cubs years to prepare for this because they want it to be a whole takes over the town type of situation here, takes over the neighborhood. And this is a potential windfall of cash for the Cubs, which I've heard they love to put the money right back into the team on the field. So the 2027 All-Star Game, Pat, pending work stoppages, assuming that we're playing baseball.
There is one, yeah.
Assuming there is one, big news for the Wrigleyville neighborhood.
Yeah, it's about a $250 to $300 billion infusion in the neighborhood, which is always nice. I know the bars and restaurants and hotels are excited about that. I personally always like to have fun things going on near my house, so I'd be happy to both attend the game. I mean, I went to the Rate Field or whatever they call it now for an All-Star game once. So I mean, I'll go anywhere. Back in 2008 or whenever that game was, to watch Eric Gagne blow his only save of the year for the National League. Thank you very much. In a year when the Cubs had the best record in the National League and it determined home field in the World Series, so it was actually a meaningful game for me. Anyway, I digress.
The All-Star game would determine home field in the World Series. It
would be the first time that the Cubs have had an All-Star game since 1990 or whatever that was, when Dawson had the home run, I think, and Sandberg was there. So that would be fun. The Cubs have not been able to, usually when you renovate your stadium or get a new stadium, you get an All-Star game fairly shortly thereafter. And the Cubs have not been able to do that because they always come up really low on the security score for neighborhood security. That's been a big issue. Now, we played an entire World Series in this ballpark, mind you, but apparently the security score is an important factor. And one of the aspects of that the Cubs do poorly on is not that they themselves do poorly at security in the ballpark. It's that the ballpark itself is in the midst of a neighborhood, and that I could launch something from my balcony and, hit the field, I guess, right? I guess is the concern. But more importantly, I think with the city streets all around, literally 10 feet from the walls of the ballpark on Addison and elsewhere, they just, the alderman in the 44th Ward, Bennett Lawson, just introduced a resolution at City Hall to give the Cubs permission to put bollards in, those concrete pipes that kind of can come up and down. I'm a huge fan because you can put them down when you don't need them, but then you can put them up, and they are used in Europe and at other stadiums all over the world, and have been for decades, to stop, like, for example, a car or a truck from ramming into the stadium with something in it. I think if the All-Star game were played, they would have to close off several streets around the ballpark, including like bus route streets like Clark Street and Addison. But I think for one game for a period of 5 or 6 hours, that's a sacrifice the neighborhood would be willing to make for the result, which would be having an All-Star game there. I know in the World Series they blocked off, like, I think it was about a half mile in every direction. It was crazy. Like, you could not drive a car to my house down unless you had a driver's license that said you lived there. And if you were on foot, as our other cousin tried to, and you brought a 6-pack of beer to somebody's house to watch a game, they wouldn't let you bring bottles within the half. I mean, it was really a tight security zone. So, but for an All-Star game, I think they can work out those issues. We won't be the first urban area to have an All-Star game, for crying out loud. So I think it'll be fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to it, but for the potential for a work stoppage, which would really be a bummer. Yeah, and to see Kyle Tucker hit a home run for the Cubs in the All-Star game would be awesome. PCA will be in the game.
Several reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, jumping ahead.
I do. I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said with a couple of, caveats. I think it is easy to lose sight because Wrigley post renovation, I think most people really like the renovation on balance, but it certainly feels more like a modern park and less like Wrigley, right? I think it's easy to overlook how unique the park still is in terms of its situation more than ever. I mean, I live here in the Twin Cities. Target Field is in the top 5, certainly in the top 10, probably in the top 5 in the league in terms of feeling nestled into a neighborhood like Wrigley is. At this point, most parks are set off much more even than Target Field. And I can tell you Target Field's this goes by the park, and that's along basically a fortified limestone wall as opposed to with any kind of actual access to the park. They focus a lot on security. I don't know, man. It's like, and again, I'm not saying dispense with security or don't take it seriously, but if someone wants to do something badly enough, there are plenty of ways they can do it with bollards or without them.
They don't have to wait till the All-Star game either.
And what I'm wary of is that these bollards get put in place under the guise of this will get the All-Star game. Huge infusion of revenue for the community. Isn't it a great event for us to have? And, Wrigley, all the events at Wrigley, games and concerts and future World Series they might host all get safer. And then what happens is, well, now they're in place. Now it's a lot easier for maybe we just shut down the streets on game days. And in fact, maybe we shut down a block in each direction pretty much permanently. And in fact, why doesn't this just become Ricketts Town? I think, which of course we're already hewing toward anyway, but I'm wary of this. There's a little bit of security theater in it.
Waveland and Sheffield are basically closed down during games already,
yeah,
right? For 2 hours before and after. I think the problem they will have, certainly Clark Street would be the biggest difficulty in terms of closing down a street because it's a major thoroughfare and it's a bus route, and I think you would get a lot of pushback. I could see them trying to close down Addison perhaps for that block because although it is a bus route, it's kind of the end of the bus route, and it's really right up against the wall of the ballpark. Unlike Clark Street, which is set back actually because of Gallagher Way and because just the ballpark itself is farther back. But yeah, I mean, that's always, I think that's a risky run regardless of whether you're the All-Star game or not. And the bollards or whatever are just, that prevents a car from ramming into the stadium, but it doesn't prevent a car from stopping in front of the stadium and doing something, which is, its own issues. So that's where we need vigilant enforcement of rules. But I mean, look, today during the game in the 5th inning, I was lazy and I drove over from my house a couple blocks away down Clark. I double parked in front of the McDonald's and ran in to get my Diet Cokes for the afternoon, which I'd pre-ordered and got them and came back out. And it was during a game, right? Like, I could listen to the crowd. I could throw a baseball and hit the stadium from where my car was double parked in front of the McDonald's across the street. And so, I mean, that probably is a unique experience that most ballparks don't have, just the cramped spacing, that you have there. But
thank goodness we have a sports book between the building and Addison. Thank goodness that sports book is there. Yeah.
I just never want to lose that. I don't want it to. No. I don't want this to be a precursor to a future where Wrigley, in its surrounds feels more and more like every other park in the league.
Right.
But, that we've been trending that way for a decade. So maybe I'm late to that, to even voice that. Maybe it's a cause we're losing already.
I guess the problem they have though, is that so many people live there and they live in newer homes and buildings. So it's hard to erase that, I think.
Let's quickly look ahead to the week that will be, and then we will close the show as we always do with our Cubs player profile. So for the week that will be, the Cubs have played one game already against Colorado.
Don't tell me what happened. I'm going to guess we
spoiler
won
alert.
3-1.
3-1. We touched on it briefly earlier. They have two more with Colorado on this homestand before Cincinnati comes in for the weekend. And so there's 5 games remaining. The Cubs already having one win. We'll go to predictions. Matt, we'll start with you as our guest. Predictions for the remaining 2 games
All
against
6.
Colorado.
Guess all 6. What's our reckoning gonna be for the 6 games?
You can do it for all 6. So 3-3 Colorado and Cincinnati.
I will guess. Let's see. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and be an optimist about it. Let's say they go 5-1. That's pushing your luck at this point. They've already had a really good run through this easy part of the schedule, but the Rockies feel like almost automatic wins. And so then you just got to win a series at home against the Reds. You can do that.
Thanks for jinxing us. I'm going to go 4-2. 4-2 keeps us on pace for the 15-6, which is the goal for this stretch. I don't want to get greedy, but we started off 9-3. You go 4-2. Now you're 13-5, and you're right on pace to go 15-6. Ben Brown does pitch this week, so that's concerning. But he does pitch against Lodolo, which is good because I want the best pitcher for the Reds against Brown. I don't want to have that another day, right? Cubs do miss Hunter Brown, I think, this time. And I do agree that the Rockies seem terrible. So I could see the Cubs either sweeping the Rockies and somehow losing 2 out of 3 to the Reds in frustrating fashion, or just a very boring 2 out of 3, 2 out of 3.
I'm going to go with Matt on the 5-1 prediction here.
I hope you're right.
I do see the one loss coming against Cincinnati, but I see this as a sweep against Colorado and 2 of 3 against these Cincinnati Reds.
By the way, Colorado is on pace to win like 26 games or something this year.
It's so bad. It's just awful.
I mean, it would be the equivalent of, Barry Bonds hit the home run record. It'd be the equivalent of somebody coming out this year and hitting 94 home runs to put Barry Bonds' record to bed forever, right? Like, as bad as the White Sox were last year, if you could outdo them by like 14 more losses at some point, it's like, it's just incredible. And yet, Matt, I was going to ask you if you noted this. Maybe you're going to do an article on this at some point. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I've been surprised by how there's been basically like almost like this newfound parity in baseball this year. There are only 6 terrible teams. Everybody else is either like almost 500 or over 500. There are like 18 teams that are like within a game of 500 or better. I know it's only a third of the way through the season, but I just feel like the split hasn't really occurred as quickly as it has in prior years, where by now they're like, oh, these 11 teams are all going to lose a lot of games. Right now we've got like 6 teams careening towards 95 plus losses, maybe 100 plus, and everybody else is sort of, keeping their head above water or close to it.
That's kind of what the projection said was going to happen this year too. So I do think it's real. I mean, there are a lot of teams too that are just on the low side of 500 that I think will improve as the season goes along a little bit. The Brewers, the Red Sox,
maybe the Reds even, frankly.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, I do think part of the reason, their offense looked a lot better this past weekend than they had previously. I think they were due to. I don't think they were as bad as their offense had looked for the first 50 games. So you don't want to be the team that someone gets healthy against, but it had to happen a little bit at some point. Yeah, I think this is a fun season because there are some bottom feeders and teams are going to get free wins, and that'll occasionally be frustrating. But a lot of good teams, and I think a lot of people thought, just based on having won the World Series last year and the spending spree and everything, that the Dodgers were this unbeatable super duper team. And there were reasons to be skeptical of that all along. But by now, a third of the way into the season, I think we're pretty well disabused of that delusion. They're very good, maybe probably still the best team in baseball, but it's only by a small margin.
At times.
Yeah.
But for those 2 gift wins they got in the middle of March.
Yeah, unbeatable in March in Japan. That's invincible. Let's go into our closing segment. We close the show every week profiling a player from Cubs history, and that Cubs player is chosen every week by our guest. When we don't have a guest, we will turn to our patrons over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation, how we keep this show ad-free every single week. They'll pick it for us. But last week, Evan Altman picked Manny Trio for Pat to review. So, Matt, you're on the clock. We will come to you for your pick at the end after we hear about Manny Trio.
Jesus Manuel Marcano, or as we know him, Manny Trio. There's a story behind that. Was born on Christmas Day, 1950. Please, let's all make a pact that come Christmas Day this year, we will either get a cupcake or a cake, put a candle in it, and wish Manny Trio a happy 75th birthday, because that will be his 75th birthday. He was born in Venezuela. He ended up, and he had a long career, so I'm going to fly through some of the stuff, but he had a 17-year career, played for 8 teams, if you count the Cubs, who he played for twice. 4-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove winner, 2-time Silver Slugger, 2-time World Series champ, and he was a NLCS MVP. There you go. He signed with the Phillies as he out of Venezuela as an undrafted free agent, and he came into the organization as a catcher. And there was a player who had just retired who had joined, I guess, in the short league, as a coach for the Phillies. It was his first coaching gig. His name was Dallas Green. And he saw something in young Manny Trio and said, you know what, this guy's got a great arm, but he's too skinny and small to play catcher. He's going to get chewed up. So he said, you need to be an infielder. So he started playing him at second and short and third, and worked him as an infielder. Now, why we have Manny Trio as a name occurred because around this time when he came to the Phillies, and the paperwork was done where he was getting his visa, et cetera, there was some confusion. For some reason, his first name got lost on the documents. So they called him Manuel, i.e. Manny, and his mother's maiden name was Trio, and there was some confusion over his last name. So they used his mother's maiden name, who had raised him and who he had lived with for many years. He said later that he was happy using her name because she'd been such a great role model for him and such a good both mother and father figure to him. So Manny Trio was born from that. After 1 year at the Phillies, however, he was picked up as a Rule 5 acquisition by the Oakland A's, which is interesting because they were in the midst of a World Series run where they were very good in the early 70s, 72, 73, 74. And in fact, that's where Manny Trio picked up his first World Series ring in his second year in 1974. However, after the 74 season, he was traded to the Chicago Cubs and he wasn't getting a lot of playing time because obviously the A's were very good. He was traded with Darryl Knowles, Bob Locker, for a guy named Billy Williams, who was 2 years removed from an MVP with the Cubs, by the way, but who was an older, player at the time. And Williams goes to the A's where he can DH because they didn't have a DH in the National League.
I talked to Billy Williams about DHing in Oakland, and he was not thrilled about not being able to play defense.
Not. Yeah. And so, meanwhile, the Cubs were able to acquire Manny Trio out of that. He was a starting second baseman for the Cubs from 75 to 78. His first year in 75, when he finally got a chance to play, he finished third in the Rookie of the Year award in the National League behind John Montefusco and Gary Carter, future Hall of Famer. The American League competition was a 2-man race between a guy named Fred Lynn and Jim Rice, another Hall of Famer. So he was in pretty good company with the Rookie of the Year honors. He quickly became, I guess, what you would call a solid defender he had a really good arm for a second baseman in particular. Although his first year in the league, as an everyday starter, he did commit quite a few errors. I think he had 29 errors that first year with the Cubs. He said, he said the other players joked with him that errors were like vitamins for him, one a day. But over time, he eliminated the errors, and in fact, not only did he win the 3 Gold Gloves, but he set a Major League Baseball record for the most consecutive attempts at second base without committing an error, 479 errorless fielding chances. So he did get much better on the fielding. He made his first All-Star team with the Cubs in 1977. It was a weird year. It was a year where the Cubs were really good. This is where you learn the term June swoon. The Cubs were like 20 games over 500, had a terrible June, had a terrible rest of the season, but finished the year 500, which was their only time at 500 or above in a 12-year span before 1984. And two of the players, so there were 4 Cubs on the All-Star team that year. There were Jerry Morales, Manny Trio, who's backing up Joe Morgan at second base, and 2 pitchers, Rick Russell and Bruce Sutter, who may have had the best starting pitcher and relief pitcher seasons in Cubs history simultaneously that year. Rick Russell had a WAR of 9.5 that year, and Bruce Sutter had an ERA of like 134 en route to the relief man of the year, Rolaids relief man of the year, whatever. But 2 of the best pitching performances in Cubs history, and Manny Trio, all squandered because of the Cubs second half flub. He was in an infield for many years with Bill Buckner, Ivan DeJesus, and Steve Ontiveros. Really, what a great foursome that was, or appeared to be before advanced statistics took hold. But certainly at the time, that was considered a really solid infield. However, after the 1978 season, Manny was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies because a guy at the Phillies named Dallas Green wanted to get him back. So the Cubs traded Greg Gross, Dave Rader, and Manny Trio for the trio of Barry Foote, Cubs catcher, Jerry Martin, and Ted Sizemore. Turned out to be a better deal for the Phillies than the Cubs.
It's still so funny how the Cubs and Phillies only traded with each other for many years.
100%. 100%. Yeah, it really is. And we'll get in. There's even more of that coming. But so as soon as the Cubs trade him, he's a 3-time All-Star the next 3 years with the Phillies. He wins the NLCS in 1980 en route to them winning the World Series. You remember when they beat the Royals and I guess the Tim McCarver, jumps up and down or whatever. And after the last Tug McGraw, I guess, was the closer and throws to McCarver. Well, you know what? None of that is possible if Manny Trio doesn't single-handedly win the NLCS for them that year. So, kudos to Manny
Trio and Del Unser.
Yes.
No Del Unser erasure here.
Yes, no. After this magnificent run with the Phillies, however, Dallas Green comes to the Cubs, right, after the 82 season, and the new ownership of the Phillies, new management, decides to trade Manny Trio. This was, at the time, it was a famous trade, so much so that it was like the cover of Sports Illustrated. It was a big deal. It was the 5-for-1 trade. Unheard of. 5-for-1. The Cleveland baseball team at the time traded a guy named Von Hayes to the Phillies, who was this up-and-coming superstar. Von Hayes had a really outstanding career, even with the Phillies. He was really good, but he never overcame the 5-for-1 tag, unfortunately. Right. But he had some excellent seasons with the Phillies. They traded him for Manny Trio, George Vukovich, brother of Cub John Vukovich, John J. Baller, future Cub also, and a little-known guy named Julio Franco, who ended up having quite the career later on with Cleveland and with the Rangers. So he was traded from the Phillies to Cleveland, and then the next year he's traded midseason to Montreal, and then he signs with the Giants as a free agent for a couple of years, but then he comes home to the Cubs in 1986, and he has this renaissance. So from 86 to 88, Manny Trio comes back to the Cubs as a super utility infielder. That's what they picked him up, because they had Sandberg and they had Dunston and a variety of people playing third base during that period. But he came back. He and Davey Lopes, of all people, were this pretty good, kind of utility probably, veteran bench presence that the Cubs had over these next couple of years. And then he played one last year with Cincinnati in 1989. I will tell you, my favorite memory, I was trying to look because I had this memory of Manny Trio hitting a walk-off home run at a game that I was at. I couldn't remember when it was, but I knew it was in this stretch. So I looked up every game in this stretch just to see every walk-off win. It was not the 1978 walk-off home run he hit against the Phillies. It was the 1986, June 8th of 1986 game when he beat the Mets 4-2 with a 2-out, 2-run walk-off home run. And that, remember, was when the Cubs and the Mets were kind of rivals at that point because the Cubs had won the division in 84, and in 85, the Mets had won. And in 86, the Mets ended up winning. But it was, this was like the back and forth, right? And so I remember after the game, everybody was chanting New York sucks as we left the stadium. But Manny Trio was the big hero off the bench, coming into the game to hit the home run. And, of course, it's one of those things where everybody knew Manny Trio because he'd kind of been he's just kind of a Cub guy, who was unfairly sent to Philadelphia to be a star, and then he came back, right? So it was nice to see him do well with the Cubs. He coached for many years afterwards. He was actually, even with the Cubs, he was their conduit for Venezuelan players, apparently. He kind of was the go-between between the Venezuelan scouts and the Cubs to kind of help identify talent and to get players before there were any rules. Not that there really are anymore, I guess. But back in the murky days of international free agency or whatever. And he did that for many years. He coached in Venezuela for many years afterwards. He was a coach in majors from 97 to 05 too. And in fact, he was Ozzie Guillen's guest he was a guest coach for the White Sox during the World Series. Ozzie Guillen had picked him out because he was one of his role models growing up, Ozzie Guillen's role models. In 2012, Manny Trio was elected to the Latino Baseball Hall of Fame with Tony Oliva, Bernie Williams, and Tony Pena. Three names that you may recall through history. He currently has a home in Orlando and one in Venezuela. He likes to play golf, and he is 74, going on 75 this Christmas. And what a nice career he had for a skinny kid who was originally tapped as an undrafted free agent catcher with the Oakland A's until Dallas Green came in and helped set his career in a different trajectory.
In that 1987 season, that's his age 36 season. He played in 108 games, had a WRC plus of 112.
Yeah.
Played a good amount of first base that year, I think. It was kind of between Durham and Grace.
Durham and Grace.
They had the rest of the infield covered, and he was kind of a platoon partner for Buckner.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Buckner's gone at that point. Yeah. But no, it was Durham who was hurt, I think, at that point.
There you go. And
was slowing down. So but apparently he was a very stand-up guy, great teammate. Everybody really liked him.
I was negative 10 or 11 years old when Trio was traded to the Phillies. That trade makes
still sticks in your craw. Yeah, right.
It was stupid in a way that even by the standards of 1970s baseball should have been obvious. It was centered around Barry Foote. That was the main, the Cubs got Ted Sizemore was atrocious, but they at least could tell themselves they were replacing Trio with Sizemore,
who lasted one season and was such an a-hole that they got rid of him, I think, even before the year was done, by the way.
Yeah, well, and he also just sucked. And Barry Foote sucked. And Barry Foote was
Barry Foote hit a ball in a Waveland once, by the way. I'll have you know.
Sure. Right.
Sure.
He was 4 years older than Manny and bad and just
And Jerry Morales was not the
area, that second half of the 70s and all the way up. I mean, people forget, all the way up through 83 until 84 itself. That's one of the darkest periods in Cubs history. And they had a chance to have it not be that bad, except they made really ugly, avoidable mistakes like trading basically Manny Trio for Barry Foote.
Yeah. Well, they also gave up Greg Gross, who was a pretty good pinch hitter in his day too.
Yeah.
You know,
just they bundled up a bunch of perfectly good stuff and gave it away for nothing.
Let's put it this way: this was coming off the heels of deciding that they didn't want to pay Bill Madlock $100,000 a year or whatever, and trading the 2-time 25-year-old batting champ. And by batting champ, I mean like 354 batting champ, not like 302. Yeah. They got rid of him. They traded a lot of players for financial reasons that they shouldn't have. In addition to the ones who they just missed on the talent. Don't forget, it was just after this when they traded Willie Hernandez in I guess 82, gave him away. He ended up winning the Cy Young and the MVP for the Tigers in 84.
You mentioned Russell and Suter and how good they were during that period. Honestly, the only difference between one of the most famous infields in baseball history of, say, Russell, Lopes, and Garvey, and the Cubs having Bill Madlock, Ivan DeJesus, Manny Trio, and Bill Buckner, the quality of those players is not very different. The composite value of those dudes. It's just the Cubs voluntarily broke theirs up because they were stupid.
Yes.
Indeed, they were, as it turns out.
One other neat tie-in for Manny Trio. I kind of vaguely had in my head that he was a case like this. There are not a lot of players, but there used to be more players who ended up basically renamed Hispanic naming conventions.
Yeah.
And how you carry your last name, your father's last name, which is the last name you'll go by, in a shortened form in your home country. And then your mother's maiden name is tacked onto the end. That's
right.
just,
and that's what happened to him.
Strung together. And they just assumed Marcano was a middle name for Manny. And
right. And that's somehow they got rid of Jesus, which was his first name for reasons that,
but the interesting thing that tie into another very notable Cub is that Sammy Sosa was actually Samuel Peralta Sosa. Sosa was his mom's name. A similar situation. He was happy to go by Sosa. I think his dad passed away when he was young.
Yeah.
So it made sense, but that was not a proactive choice. Even when he signed in the mid 80s, it was just like, but now I'm Sammy Sosa.
From a marketing standpoint, Sammy Sosa sounds better than Sammy Peralta, doesn't it? Like it just goes, it comes off the tongue nicer.
Looks better on a cereal box. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the naming conventions are interesting. Also, the way that players were acquired from other places at the time, like from South America and from Latin America at the time, it was a real free for all. And the fact that they had an active player on their team, actually talking to scouts and with people in Venezuela who were sort of like controlling whatever the players were down there. I guess today that'd probably be illegal in some way, but at the time it was like, oh, that's great. You're from there, people.
There are just rules against it now.
Yeah, right. you got friends down there? Please help us out.
Yeah. All right, Matt, you are on the clock now. Let us know who is your pick for next week. By the way, the Joe Pepitone pick you had earlier this season, still one of the most talked about Cubs player profiles so far this year. So looking forward to hearing your next selection.
Yeah, this one's not going to be as fun or colorful, except if, for the segment of your listeners, which, let's be honest, there's a good segment of your listeners who are like me. I'm a 36-year-old white man. We take up a lot of the podcast listening audience in this world. I am exactly the right age to have loved this guy during his really very short Cubs tenure. But if he could have just stayed healthy, I'm convinced he would have been awesome. He certainly looked awesome when he was actually able to get on the field. Rondell White.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Former Expo.
Yep.
part of the magical summer of 01, and we don't need to spoil it. But
Yeah,
there you go.
that's a good one.
Yeah,
Rondell
great.
White.
Rondell White next week. And with that, it's about time to wrap up this show. Time flies when we're talking Cubs with Matt Trueblood. Matt, please remind all of our listeners how they can find your work on the internet.
Northsidebaseball.com. I'm also on Blue Sky.social, whatever. And I write twice a week at Baseball Prospectus. So if you subscribe there, or even if you don't, check that out and consider subscribing. It's a great place.
And you can follow us on all the social media platforms as well at Wrigleyville Nat. And of course, the YouTube channel where the video version of this podcast is. We need you to continue to go and throw us those likes and subscribes over there. Helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. Even if you don't consume your podcast via the video form, the likes and subscribes help us out over there. And you can continue to get the podcast in all the audio podcatcher places that you choose. If you choose Spotify, though, fun fact, the video version is also available in the same Spotify player and feed that you're listening to the audio version on. So you can enjoy the video version of this podcast as well. So please continue to spread the word. Tell your Cub fan friends about the show. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you again next time.